Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. Welcome to our 36th episode of Lead Strong. My name is Celine Floyd. I'm one of the directors of Capfinity's talent practice. We are a company specialising in strengths-based assessment and development. We have offices in the UK, America, and Australia, and we support organisations with their talent agenda from apprentice level all the way up to board level. Steph and I head up the talent practice, which specialises in supporting organisations with their incumbent talent. Lovely to see you again, Steph, and we are so excited about our episode today. Steph, hi. Nice to see you again, as always.
Thanks, Celine. Yeah, really pleased to be here for another episode, another great topic, and two fabulous guests. So as Celine said, I'm one of the other directors of the talent practice at Capfinity, and today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurialism and leadership. So I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves, and I wondered if you'd tell us a little bit about yourself and your career and why you're passionate about leadership. Dan, if I could come to you first of all.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much, Steph. My name is Dan. I'm the co-founder of the Stable School in Christchurch, and we support young people with mental health and social emotional challenges to get through their education. Kind of stumbled into it, as most of us do, I think, and left university working for a national children's charity, supporting young people at risk of being sexually exploited, and a risk of going into young offending routes. Then retrained as a teacher when I met my now wife, who's the other co-founder. She persuaded me, as we wanted the 6 weeks off in the summer together. No, that's not the reason to go to teaching. Suddenly, after a few years, moved into special educational needs coordination within mainstream education, and became quite disillusioned really with the systems. We are finding it's the same young people that are having the same challenges week on week, term on term, and through no fault of the leadership that we had at the time. There were strong school leaders. It was just a system wasn't supportive. And so we kind of had that moment in life where we said it was 1 October half term. There was definitely some red wine involved, and we said we can either spend the next 30 years of our careers moaning about the problems, or we can try and do something about it. And that was when we formed the Stable School.
Amazing. And Dan, just any thoughts from you on why you're passionate about leadership, I guess?
Yeah, I think for me, particularly in startups and working with people, I think leadership is about how you can bring a concept to reality. And you can only really do that through strong, respectful relationships. And I think working with quite often vulnerable young people and families is the same message that we're trying to give to staff as well as to our service users. Really, it's about trust, and for it to be really successful. And I think the most successful leaders have that ability to install trust and to get those systems in place that people can really buy into.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan. And Al, welcome. Lovely to see you. Perhaps you could do the same. Tell us a bit about yourself and your career and why you're passionate about the subject of leadership.
Yeah, sure, Steph. Hello, everyone. Al Pearson. I'm co-owner and director of Octo Financial Planning. I've been in the financial service industries for over 35 years, hence the colour of my hair, and 30 years plus of that in sort of various management and leadership roles. Started off in the corporate world, decided maybe that wasn't for me, and then moved more into entrepreneurial businesses, started my own companies, and have sort of run, built and sold 2 of those businesses. So leadership for me, Steph, is key, certainly in any entrepreneurial business, because it starts with an idea or ideas, and someone has to lead that, be passionate about that idea, and be able to convey that to the people who are working with you. So I think it plays a major part, certainly in the entrepreneurial world, because it's all about being agile, speed of decisions and all that type of thing, really. So delighted to be here.
Delighted to have you. Thank you both. And obviously different industries and different focuses, but already so many synergies between what you're saying. And I'm really excited about this conversation, because I think there's so much kind of courage and and just excitedness around this idea of taking something from concept to execution. So I know that there's going to be lots that the audience are going to find really useful today. And as always, in preparation for this episode, we did some digging around into the topic, and I stumbled across some really interesting stats, actually, which I'll reel off just to paint the picture, perhaps, of entrepreneurialism generally. So as of yesterday, there were 582 million entrepreneurs in the world, and 90% of billionaires are self-made, which is fascinating, isn't it? Billionaires currently around, absolutely self-made, started with not that amount of money, and 20% of small businesses failing within their first year. And what I found really interesting was that of owners of successful businesses, only 1% have a doctoral degree, and only 7% have a kind of professional qualification, which really got me thinking to actually, it's so much more than qualifications and IQ, which is a trend that we've seen in leadership for many, many years, but kind of really quite stark in those stats. And then the final one, which, knowing both of you, I know that you will smile at, 70% of entrepreneurs report working consistently more than 60-hour weeks. And I think it's well known, isn't it, that you can't be successful without putting in a lot of blood, sweat and tears. So really interesting kind of backdrop for entrepreneurs and what makes them successful. But of course, we have two successful entrepreneurs in front of us. So our first question, really, obviously on this series, we talk a lot about successful leadership and what that looks like. And what do you think, and we'll come to Al first, Al, what do you think successful leadership looks like specifically in the context of being an entrepreneur and building what is often new and untested businesses?
Sure. I think it probably all starts with a vision. From that leader, and certainly I feel it's really important to have a clear vision, and one that you can then convey to ensure that everyone who works with you understands that vision and ideally have bought into it. And my sort of analogy with that is it's a bit like a sat nav in a car. If you have a clear vision, in your car, you want to go from A to B. Well, if B is your vision of the business, then it's all about finding the right route to get you to that objective. And also when you hit crossroads or roads get closed or you have diversions, it's about focusing on what that vision is to help you find the best route, really. So I think certainly for me, that's the key. You already mentioned it in your introduction, but being passionate about what you do in conveying that vision as well. I'm a firm believer that that breeds to your people that you work with. If you look at any of the leaders in the world, typically they're very passionate about what they do. So I do think that's key. And then for myself, probably finally, it's about creating the right environment for the people that you work with. Because quite often, entrepreneurs sometimes think in a different way. They move at a different pace, but you need to have the people around you and the environment where it's okay for people to ask for help. It's okay for someone to get things wrong, so long as maybe it's only once and you learn from it. But for me, it's also most important to enjoy what you do whilst you're trying to maintain that healthy work balance that you've just touched on, and yet working the 60 plus hours is the norm, I guess. but you have to keep a balance to keep yourself healthy.
Yeah.
So a mix of all that, really.
Yeah, no, lovely. And I love that, you know, this setting an example, isn't it? And I love where you touched upon, you know, the individual as the business builder and people looking to that individual, but also, as you say, the environment and the culture that you're creating around you.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you were saying, Elle, was really echoing with a word that, Dan, you used early on in your intro around trust. And I feel like that's probably going to be a bit of a theme of this conversation. Dan, does what Al said kind of echo with your own views on that particular question of what successful leadership looks like specifically in an entrepreneurial business?
Yeah, hugely. And I think it is really interesting how, like we said, that the two industries couldn't really be further apart. But I'm linking back to what you mentioned, Selena, around formal qualifications in entrepreneurs. That actually really fills me with a lot of hope for the young people we work with as well. Because you're right, particularly in entrepreneurship, like it's not about what you've learned from an academic perspective. It's have you got the drive and the personality to bring something into reality. And I think one of the biggest things I found since we set up in 2018 was that actually I've got to know my own skill limitation as well. And we've kind of looked at this quite a lot in terms of I'm definitely a developer. And so I've got ideas. I then probably have undiagnosed ADHD, which means, you know, we're kind of going at a million miles an hour. But actually for that entrepreneurial business to then develop and grow, it then needs a completely different skill set. So we then need to look at people that can enhance that service. And then after that, we then need someone that can evaluate what you've got and then go back to the developer and say, yeah, let's go next stage. Without knowing that, I think in entrepreneurship, there's a real danger that it's got to be all you. It can only be you that does it because it's your idea. And it's not a weakness to know that there's probably people in your organization, or if not, you need to bring them in, who have a totally different skill set to yourself. And that's the way to then grow into something that isn't all about that singular person. I remember listening to a podcast, I think, from Stephen Bartlett's shows it, and it is about if you're self-employed, but you can't not go into work, you're not self-employed, you're still employed. And that kind of really resonated. Then it's not all on one person for it to be successful.
I love that. And it's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because you need enough self-belief to push you and your ideas and your vision forward, but enough humility, presumably, to know where you need help in. And you mentioned Katie in the opener, who's your co-founder and your wife. And knowing Katie well, I can see how your skill sets work together. And Al, I know you're as you say, a co-founder of your current business, and so it's, you know, you've both got that in common as well. Actually, looking, and Steph and I talk about it a lot, don't we, Steph, around the strengths-based approach and celebrating and acknowledging individual strengths and looking at where they can be complemented. So yeah, some really interesting content there. Thank you.
I think at one stage I was running my own business, and we were doing a lot of work with tech startups. And I remember going into a conversation with a business that had grown, you know, really rapidly, and in a couple of years they had 200 employees. And the big challenge that they were facing was the limitations of the founders and their skill set. So I thought it was really interesting that you brought that up, Dan, because they felt kind of stuck actually by the limitations of the founders. And it was that point at which probably they needed to completely remove themselves so that the business could move on to the next stage. It needed a different leadership, actually. But I think that must be so difficult when you're hooked in and it was your bright idea that has absolutely taken off, you know?
Yeah, I think it is difficult, but it's having confidence that the systems you've put in place, people have bought into. And Al mentioned that about having that kind of professional challenge culture, I guess, as well, isn't it? That yes, it's our idea, but that's what it was. It's a concept. To now bring that forward, it needs depth. our house is terrible. Like I'll decorate one room and I'll do 3 walls because the 4th one I'm bored.
Yeah.
But it's knowing that that's going to happen, and then finding some way to make sure it does get finished.
Having the yin to your yang lined up so that
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okay. So just moving on a bit, I'm wondering if you both reflect on your career to date, what are the 3 most powerful lessons you've learned when it comes to being the leader of a startup? And perhaps this time I'll come to Dan, first of all.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's really, really tricky and really interesting. But I guess without wanting to sound too cheesy, that it's about really believing in that your skill set is strong enough to make that thing happen, whatever that might be. And that could be if you're leading a new team as part of a big organization, or you're doing something completely solo and something completely new, that there'll always be people who may seem to you like the experts, or they may portray themselves as experts, who disagree or say that won't work, or you can't do that because. And I think if you really believe in something, you just got to roll that dice. You just got to do it. Because if we don't, well, if no one ever changed anything, we would never have invented the aeroplane. So that we have no holidays for Celine. And we all know how much
we all know how sad that would make me. That would be awful.
So I guess it's about really maintaining that firm belief that you've got the skill set to do it. You're then going to have the conviction to make it happen despite the critics, but also still having, and we touched on this quite a lot, that humility to kind of say, actually, they've got a particular skill set or experience I can tap into here, but don't deviate from that. I guess it's like the yellow brick road, kind of like stuff could take you off track, but if you talking to or looking back to what Al was saying about having that clear vision, you've got to have that vision. People try and take you off track, but actually you have that faith in yourself, but learn from what others can give as well. But I guess be quite selfish with it. Take what people can give and leave what they can't.
It's like having that North Star, isn't it? I guess always that guides what people are doing. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Dan. Al, what are your most powerful lessons? Give us 3.
I think probably linked to what I said earlier, one of the absolute key ones as a leader has got to be good communication. And I think if you look up the definition of that, it's all about shared understanding. And I think what I've seen over my far too many years is you get a lot of leaders who tell or pass on information, and they automatically assume that their people fully understand it the same way as they've meant it. And quite often that's not the case. And I think, as Dan said, if you can then bring in people who've got skill sets to help you achieve whatever it is you're looking for that you might not have, and between you can get that message across to everyone, makes such a difference, really does. I think the other one for me is taking all your people on the journey with you. And again, it's all about that vision, the message, but you need to make sure that everybody in your business understands the journey and share as much as you can or you're comfy with, because when you reach a decision point or a crossroads or a challenge to your business, the more people who've got an understanding will help give views, challenge which route you're going to go to now get you to that point, and that then enables you to make the right decision for the business. You might not always do what your people say, but by allowing them to have a challenge, it helps and hones your thinking, I think. And then I guess finally, probably it's about keeping the structure that you have in your business to make sure that it allows you to be agile and make quick business decisions. Because I think all too often, you said about big corporates and whatever, sometimes that can become challenging where they don't make decisions quick enough because of maybe too many tiers of management or whatever it may be. So certainly I think that's important.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because actually, as a business scales, you need more structure and process. You can't organise, herd everyone unless you've got some. But often that agility that people love in a small startup feels like it's being diluted, doesn't it? And there's a tension there, I think, as a business grows.
Yeah, I think so. And as Dan said, if you take on the right people and they have the right autonomy, then you can maybe prevent that from happening.
Yeah, we've faced that really similarly in the last 12 to 18 months. Probably we started off as a team of two when we were a tutor centre, and then when we first opened as a school, we had a team of 19. We've now got 55, and that brings a whole new level of challenge. And going back to what we talked about before, that's probably not my strength now as a more of a kind of developer. I find that type of maintaining and enhancing quite challenging. But that's when we just need to get those systems in place. That there's another layer of strong leadership that helps in that day-to-day running, but still keeps the vision there and really pronounced. So it's almost like it's lived and breathed every day, but it doesn't need that person to be saying it every single day.
Yeah. We were in our last episode, we were talking about something similar, weren't we, Steph? I think it was Richard that said, a sign of successful leadership is when that leader is represented, even though they're not in the room, like where it's just so the vision and the ways of working and the aspirations are so well embedded that actually you don't need to be in every conversation. But it's tricky. It's and we've worked with lots of organisations, and Catfinity's been through its own journey. Starting similarly with 2 co-founders. We're now nudging towards 200 people, after 17 years. And every time you go into the next bracket of 10 people, the 70 or up to the 90, then past 100, you get a whole new set of challenges. Al, have you seen that? Because presumably with your different businesses over the years, have you had different headcounts aligned to that?
Celine, being an entrepreneur is all about winging it and whatever. The hearing aids I've got have just, whether the batteries have run out or what, really difficult to hear you. So
don't worry.
I'm not sure I got your question. My apologies.
Don't worry. Don't worry. We're as always, we're running out of time anyway, Al. I'll catch up with you about it offline. We were talking about headcount and some of the challenges there. But yeah, okay. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for the conversation today. It has been really interesting, as we knew it would be, and I think there are so many lessons to be learned, from the perspective of the bigger corporates. And we've talked about speed of decision making and agility. And it's really interesting every time we look at leadership. There are so many commonalities in these conversations, despite looking at it through lots of different lenses and in different contexts. Some of the things that have really stood out to me today from our conversation is, we've talked a lot around the vision that entrepreneurs and business starters have. And Dan, I loved when you were talking about, having courage around that and self-belief, and that you will meet along the way people with a different view or people that tell you that something can't be done. But actually, having, and you use the word faith, which I think is quite a powerful kind of word to express that, you know, faith in your idea, but not too much faith that you become blinded to the help that people can offer. And Al, you were talking about that as well, around you know, that balance between having self-belief and courage in yourself and your idea, but not to the point of being overly arrogant. And we talked about knowing your skill sets and knowing where your limitations are, and where you need help from other people or people to complement your style. And we talked a lot around the role of a leader in an entrepreneurial business, is to really build trust with people and to inspire people to join you, typically on something that is uncharted or unprecedented. And so the stakes are particularly high. Expressing passion around what you do is really important. And of course, creating the right environment for people to be successful. And most recently, then we just talked about, you know, as the head count goes up in your startup business, it becomes harder to keep a handle on that culture and that vision. And so then the challenge is, how do I keep relaying that, but in a way that is scalable and where we don't lose a lot of the amazing things that got the business to where it is today. So tricky balance to be had there. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories and your insights from your respective careers in different industries. But as we saw, there's a lot of synergy there. If I may, before we close, I'd love to come to each of you for your final thoughts on everything we have discussed today, and perhaps some parting words for our audience, a kind of parting takeaway. Al, I'll come to you first, if you can hear me properly. Yeah.
Incredibly faintly. I might have to do sign language, which I'm not very good at, but yeah, no, I think, you know, great listening to Dan. I think certainly its vision, its passion, it sums up entrepreneurialism. It's about following your heart and finding the right people, you know, so it's been really enjoyable.
Oh, thank you, Al. Perfect. Thank you. And Dan, parting words from you.
Yeah, I think just be brave and celebrate the fact that something's not happened yet, and like really embrace that. And yeah, like celebrate the fact that your own value could be the very thing that is the sellable product. And the rest of it, or the service, or whatever it might be, the rest of it can come with people and with time. But I think if you really believe in your own values and what you want to do, then you just got to do it. Otherwise, you're going to spend 30 years regretting it. But lovely to meet Al today, and to kind of, it's been so interesting, the world of finance and school life. But actually, it just comes back down to relationships again, doesn't it? And people. So yeah, it's great. Thanks for your time, everybody. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dan. And I think the other lesson from your opener is the role of red wine in an October half-term conversation, and the power of a good conversation over red wine. And yeah, what you and Katie have done in the intervening years, I think, is really inspirational. And Steph, last but of course not least.
I think the sort of thing that Dan and I riffed on a bit around your own limitations as a founder stayed with me, because in all our leadership development programs, we talk about the foundation piece being self-awareness, and self-awareness being the meta skill of the 21st century. And it just shows how important it is, whatever sort of leader we are, to know your limitations, but also know your strengths and know the point at which you need to get other people helping you. So yeah, I thought it was a great conversation. Thank you from me as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Steph. Okay. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for our audience for listening. We're back in 2 weeks' time, episode 37, which I believe is on well-being and the role of well-being in organisations. So another good conversation to be had there. But for now, enjoy the rest of your evenings and days and the rest of your week. Thank you, as always, for listening. Thanks again, Dan and Al, and we'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.